Okay, guys, so we're going to have a little conversation about the darn glucometer. And I want to talk about this subject because of a particular woman who's been writing on my YouTube comments. And she was writing very confidently and responding to other people and saying, actually, to be in ketosis, you don't need to be under a glucose of 4.4 millimolar or 80 grams per deciliter. You can be in the 90s. And I was like, whoops. Now rewind. What? Based on what? Well, based on all the stuff that I've heard online. Well, all the stuff that you've heard online, my darling, is subjektivt, as the Swedish would say. It's subjective because there has been no long-term studies on keto. Except for me, the scientist in the field, right? Working with people like rolling the sleeves up and getting dirty and actually talking to people every day. I just had a consultation right now. So it's very, very interesting to talk about this woman's lifestyle and what were her blood values. Could she adapt, essentially? And this is what this video is about. It's about, like, what does it actually mean to adapt? Should your numbers actually be? Does it matter if your glucose is in the 90s? And of course it does, because I have coached a lot of people on Skype, over 1,500. My Facebook and email, thousands, dozens of thousands. And people are always emailing me in their progress reports, if I like it or not. They do. But with that, I learn a lot. And yes, here's the problem. When your glucose is in the 90s, now I'm a pretty fit, healthy person. I've got good clearance. I have a high glucose tolerance level. I've got nice, wonderful GLUT4 receptors that learn how to gobble up the glucose that my body either makes or what I used to eat. So yes, my glucose would sit in the 90s after a carb meal. So you would test your glucose 1.5 to 2 hours post-meal, and if your glucose does not spike, it should spike, maybe 100, early hundreds, drop back down, and your fasted numbers or your numbers post-meals should be in the 90s. That's if you ate carbs. Well, how can your glucose be in the 90s and use ketones? Just saying, you're reading online that you're gonna have a glucose in the 90s and be in ketosis? Based on what? Because you read it online? It doesn't mean anything. Because there have been no long-term studies on the subject. So people like me, your average Jolena, yes, what I experience with people, it matters. And the hundreds of journals, stacks of journals and information that I get from people, everyone's story matters. And this is where I get my information from. And the trend goes like this. Ketones you can make ketones with the 90s. You can even make ketones with your glucose in the hundreds. And you can have good ketone values and not use them. Because as soon as you have that much glucose in the bloodstream in the 90s and 80s, the brain's like, well, I can go do this ketone thing, or I could just keep going with the glucose that's still high in the bloodstream. You're not even eating carbs at this point. Why is your glucose in the 90s? Your glucose should drop exponentially when you're using ketones, right? Ketones spike, glucose drops, and they should be in opposition, and voila. You're entering a highly adapted keto state if you can consistently manage those numbers. And of course, if there's sirens out there in that mess of a post-apocalyptic world out there. So in theory, people keep thinking because I'm making ketones, which is why the keto salts are junk, because hello-sies, if your glucose is too high, those ketones aren't being used. A lot of them become wasted in the urine, and the body doesn't use them. The brain doesn't like to compete with two fuel sources, so I don't know where you guys are getting your information from. doesn't want to go back and forth and back and forth. It either wants to use glucose and be glucose dependent, or it wants to be ketone dependent. So some people who have both, and it is very rare, some people who produce a lot of glucose, 90s, 100s, and ketones, 2s, higher, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, they lose them. They go in the toilet. You want to know where I'm getting my information from? You guys. So testing people and testing people and testing people, I realized that people don't show the physical effects beyond the blood glucometer of being keto adapted until their glucose drops under 80 milligrams per deciliter or 4.4 millimolar. Don't you love the sirens? It's just fabulous. It just adds that little background sound, since I can't have music on my videos because YouTube will yank it. So we just have sirens. It's an emergency. Okay. So I've tested people and tested people and tested people and talk every day with the glucometer. In the beginning, people weren't even using glucometers. Guys are using urine strips. And then they graduated to the breathalyzer, like, I'm in the yellow. I don't know if what that really means, but And then finally people started using blood glucometers to measure ketones. They forgot to measure their glucose. They would check their ketones. They'd be like, oh my God, I'm in a 5. Yeah, cool, bro. I'm like, but I'm still crashing in the middle of the day and I still can't sleep at night. My inflammation is there. My gout won't go away. And my menstrual cycle is still wonky. You're not adapting. The true telltale sign without a glucometer is consistent, even energy. Which is why in my videos I'm like, energy, 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 energy. Yes, girls got some energy. And some people say like, oh, but that's just naturally how you are. No. This does not lie. Nor does having fat, nice, lovely subcutaneous fat in my skin to prevent me from looking freaking dried out. This doesn't lie. If I'm faking my energy or if I'm overexerting my adrenals to pump out adrenaline because I'm not really using ketones, you're gonna see my mental cognition go down and not think clearly. Yes? This is eventually going to affect the sub-Q around my waist and my estrogen dominance and my inability to grow muscle. Because if I'm running on glucose and I'm lying and I'm running on glucose, I would not have these muscles. And if I was lean from carbs, then I would look more dry, and I'm not dry anywhere. It's not rocket science, guys. Pretty easy to understand. Yeah, you can't build muscle if your body is stressed out, especially a woman who's almost 50 years of age. Yes, soon to be 50. I'm not 50 yet, but I like to use the word 50 to remind you guys I'm not any kind of spring chicken. No. So it is important to understand. Let me check what the time is. It's very, very important to understand that you have to get your glucose under 80 milligrams per deciliter or 4.4 millimolar. Your ketones must be at a 1.8 or higher, because this woman also wrote, no, a 1.0 is where ketones, you start to feel energy. You start to feel energy, but you don't got the step energy. You don't have the mental, sharpness. You don't. You want to get your ketones around a 2. Even Steve Finney, Jeff Bullock have said that in their own book, as a 2.0 sweet spot. Because the higher ketones go, the more you lose them in your urine. Under 80 milligrams per deciliter. Well, here's the thing. Some of you guys are presenting, and this is where some of what she says or said might have any sort of relevance. There are people with glucose in the 60s, ketones over a 3, and they don't feel good. And I'm like, you're quasi-hypoglycemic. You've got to do and write a journal. It's not enough to go by the numbers. Because some people can have a glucose in the 50s and ketones in the 3s and be like, yo, I feel amazing. I'm getting ripped. I'm growing in muscle. It's amazing. Everyone is different and no one will adapt at the same speed. So stop asking for the number because that number does not exist. You've created this fakeness in your mind of trying to calculate your body in numbers, and it's impossible. Everybody is different. And your discipline is going to be indicative of how fast you adapt or how slow. But do not believe ever, I don't care what you read, that you're in ketosis with glucose in the 90s and even in the 80s, because that's still a lot of glucose for the brain to compete with. They can't be like this on the same level. They must be in opposition. Your ketones either must be low and glucose must be high and you are a sugar burner, or your ketones are high and your glucose is low and you are a ketone burner. The nutritional ketosis, right? The coin by Jeff Bullock and Steve Finney. But the reality is people are like, I'm in ketosis. No, you're not. Because as long as your body is, just because you make ketones doesn't mean diddly squat. You can still have hypoglycemia. You can still not fight cancer. You can still have fibroids that won't shrink. You can still have diabetic issues. You can still have heart disease, and you can still have adrenal and thyroid and depression and sleepless nights and inflammation and wounds that won't heal and 20 colds a year, and should I go on and what is it? Chronic fatigue and infertility. It's no joke. Don't just believe the hype. At least with my voice, it's coming from you guys. It's coming from learning about everybody's journey into their keto adaptation. I didn't pull this stuff out of my bunghole, guys. I'm getting it from Uzies. So if you guys want to learn more how to get into ketosis, I am writing an ebook. People have been hounding me for a book or something, and I am starting to write it. I've already started writing it. I'm going to try to get it done within this month of April 2016. And if you want to learn more, it's a questions and answer book, and I'm talking about the book because it'll put pressure on me to get the damn thing done. Put in these things that I've learned from you guys. Or you can go to Stephanie the Business Person on my Facebook fan page, and I like to talk about the body and get nice discussions where I learn from you guys. Or Stephanie Ketogenic on my Instagram, where I get to learn from the youngins who look at all these ripped chicks with freaking 8-packs, right? Super shredded chicks who are on drugs and starving themselves, most. Or you can go to Periscope, have a live interactive conversation with me. So download the app onto your smart device and look for Steph the Business so we can get it on. A good conversation. So peace out, guys. Peace out.